which is where, to me, the work begins. And we live in a scientific paradigm of intellectual stuckness. And it's very comfortable, and it's very comfortable for me. I live in that paradigm too. So I often will revert to my head to distract myself. I love having a sophisticated audience. So the culture that I share with you means we usually have a mutual language. So I can say all kinds of Northern California airy-fairy things, and you're going, oh yeah, you don't think anything of it. But, you know, I'm getting ready to go back to Florida. My creationist, very conservative relatives, and I will change my language in order to honor the inclusion I want to give and receive. So we all are biological beings living inside a culture. That's our context, right? And it goes below the surface of our conscious awareness all the time, me included. So before I explain what these puppets are or anything else, this is a precursor to where we're going. There was a group of fish that gathered in a school to discuss whether or not there was the probability of water existing. The water is our culture, you know, and of course there are those of us who have pioneered in our lives, and we've either produced or we have found our own subcultures to live in. And yet we also need to be a part of the wider culture, right? And that's what people, everything I'm telling you today, I'm just giving back what I have learned. This is primarily Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, who is a psychologist and a real rebel, who put together a process called Nonviolent Communication, and also biocognitive psychology. And primarily the author was that, Dr. Mario Martinez. But since we're all these things inside of a culture, we are often only aware, or let's say capable of being aware of reading these biosymbols that come. And if this sounds a little strange, that's the way we process new information. So let me interrupt myself and say, not that we need Antonio Damasio, who's this great mind, to tell us this, because Grandma knew this and we know this. But any new information, we're like, whether you think you're receptive or not, part of you is going, oh, yeah, and kind of like, maybe, you know. And we'll talk about the paradigm shift that we're all familiar with in a little bit. So what I'm asking for right here, right now, is permission for you to be at choice for absorbing this information and then using it in your own life, deciding for yourselves, no, I don't buy that, or that was spot on. For one thing, because we're from different cultures, our perceptions are going to be different, right? And we're going to look for evidence that maintains our truth inside our own culture. So in doing so, that does not make, make us wrong. We're out of the realm of right or wrong now. And we can just honor that there's a different perception. So I'm just asking you to be at choice about what you bring in today. If you see judgments coming up, that's great. That's part of the homework. We're wanting to unearth those several voices that we have inside. We have a stream of consciousness that's going on all the time. And then we have active thoughts that come from another part of the brain. And when that happens, that means we can have multiple conversations going on, and we're not crazy. We're just, well, we're all a little crazy. Let's just say that. But we are not clinically having a problem, let's just say it that way, in this group. These can be really subtle. So actually, I'm always excited to bring this information, even though it may be absolutely nothing you have heard 10,000 times. But we all need to be reminded of this because we do not live in this paradigm. We live in the paradigm of the head. So I just thought we would use some anti-intellectual tools today, if we get to it. We'll see how far we go. But you know what? Even though we may not get to this, let me explain. This is a great game. It's really easy. You'll always remember how to do it. And you can play it at home. And kids love this too. Well, we're all kids, but big kids and little kids love this. And I can't think of I wish I could think of a lighthearted example, but I can't. Dr. Hernandez Arriaga and I worked many years together at UC Berkeley in domestic violence. And I was there for so many years, I don't recall whether she and I worked on this specific case, but it was one of the toughest that we ever had. We had a student who came who was, for all intents and purposes, being held hostage by her husband. And now this also happens with females, folks. Granted that, but the vast majority is people who identify as male. So I don't feel too uncomfortable giving this example. This man was also a product of his culture. But there was also physical abuse, not just emotional abuse, but she was literally being held hostage. And he was walking her to classes and back, and she was not allowed to go anywhere else. And she came to the attention of her professors because of the abuse, the overt part of it. So we got involved. And to make a long story short, she came to us, we gave her sanctuary, we helped her change her identity, because she was in danger and she had threats. And we poured so much time and energy and resources into her. And she began to realize that there was another world out there. She had never chosen her own television channel. So when we think about the choices that we have in our brains, it behooves us to know all of our voices and learn this embodiment. Because one of the ways that we were very gentle with her, and you guys are, you're here I go again. Okay, y'all are, I've been dinged for saying you guys. Y'all are studying, and I'm from Texas, so I can say y'all. So y'all are studying that you just don't go in with somebody who's been abused like that forever and ever and say, how could you let that guy? You don't make it, and this is right out of Nonviolent Communication, you don't make an enemy image of somebody who's done the harm. And this is also a restorative justice model where everybody gets support. They may need different kinds of support, and they definitely get high control for accountability. So it's not, not that he didn't get, he didn't get in trouble. He did. But what happened was, it takes seeing the suffering on all sides to soften you into not making an enemy image of someone who's done what he did. And one of our colleagues just couldn't handle it when she decided she was going back to him. And this was 23 years of basically being imprisoned. Well, that's a long time for a programmed brain to repeat. And we'll talk about that. And we'll talk about the mechanism of this in neuroscience. And you're shaking, everybody's shaking your heads because we know this, don't we? And we also know, okay, so now we can look at it in fMRIs. We know because we've observed, we've had experience. But one of my colleagues just couldn't handle it, and these are jackal eaters. And this is a jackal, and that's a giraffe. Giraffe has the largest heart of any land mammal. So we use the giraffe in nonviolent communication. And she just lost it with this woman. How could you do this? You've got your whole life ahead of you. How could you make this mistake? She just shamed her. which is just about the worst thing you can do to somebody who's dealing with shame. But she's human too. And she had put the most work into. So then, of course, she immediately got the jackal going inside. This is the internal jackal. You screwed up everything. You just drove her back. It's your fault. What were you thinking? Well, I've got the 4 chairs up here if you want to follow this. It's your fault. How could you go back? It's my fault for shaming you. And then you begin to look at your emotions. And then, you know, as she just was judging herself really harshly, and she was feeling the tension in her stomach from the rage that she felt here, where's the tightness in her chest. She, you know, and she was just feeling unappreciated and unseen, and what good am I? And then here comes the judgments for her. And then she began to give herself, well, look, you put a lot of time and effort in. You really got attached to her, didn't you? No. And you just did the best you could. Yeah, you just, it was too much for you, huh? You should have asked for help, but you just didn't realize, right? Yeah. Well, maybe there's something you can do. Maybe you can just go and talk to her. You're human, you know. Okay. Just before the woman leaves, because she's free, right, to make her own decisions, they had a heart-to-heart talk. And she just really let her know how much she regretted what she said. And the woman understood. And she still went back. Sorry to not have a happy ending, but that's the truth. And we just hope that at some point she gained enough insight and stamina to change him. She loved him. And it's her choice, right? And they had children. So that's basically the 4 chairs. And I love this process because this is where we go, isn't it? And there's no reason that this has to be verbal. This can just be, you know, that idiot, you know, internally. And then you usually turn it on yourself because the way we treat other people is often the way we treat everybody else, right? But we're human, so we're going to go to these places. It's what I've learned. I do family mediation. What I've learned is it's not necessary always to resolve a conflict, but you can agreeably come to a harmonious agreement, even if it's to agree to disagree. What's his name? Gottman, who's the marriage expert, says that there are in long-term healthy relationships, there's some arguments that it just seems like healthy couples need to have to sort of define this is me and this is you. And then they, you know, they have it, and then they have to go off and do whatever, you know, he goes fishing and she, you know, she goes something out, who knows, you know. But anyway, they just need to have that every 10 years or something. So it's what we do with it. And suppressing or repressing this is also not healthy. Because if we just think of when we're here, it's information. Then we're self-aware, and then we can express it and listen to it. And even if it's fear-based, which anger often is, then when this starts, we're still in the information gathering, even though now we're turning it on us. And here's the important part, because this is where the insight comes in. And it has to come from love, right? So fear and anger, love. And that cures it. So what you get is, this is how we live in the outside world, right? So this is our nonviolent process. This is our internal process. And for the world, this may not even be visible. It may be that this is what we say out loud, or this is what we do, or this is what we think. So that this defines who we are, not this process. And the more this is open and honest internally, the more we can fully live here. Free, right? Because we're not running from something. That's why what goes on in our bodies, it tells us the truth. Isn't it? This, I don't know about this, listen to this. But this always tells us the truth, right? So if we just listen and honor ourselves as being human, and this is part of the process, then we don't judge harshly all the horrible things we think and feel. We nurture them like we would clients, like we would somebody else. And there are no shoulds, except maybe in the Jacqueline, but you know what I mean. In this process, there's no shoulds. And when the judgments come, then we have the conscious awareness to say, here I go, that's an old, I learned to do that. I think I need to do that to control myself, but actually, I don't. So there's that. Now, I want us to have a little bit of fun though, and I want us to sort of jump right into this. So we all have our little rituals, or we all have, I like to say I like to have a mini adventure a day. You're my mini adventure. And thank you for letting me come here and talk on about something I feel so passionate about. But if we, let's see, 1, 2, are we an even number? We can do it. Is that all right? If you'll turn to the person to your right, and if you will just share whatever your daily ritual or your little mini adventure is that you do, or it doesn't have to be daily or whatever. Just something that and this can be anything you want. It can be your latte. It can be the way you get up in the morning, this set routine that you have if you're a routine person, or that you like to just get enjoyment about doing silly things. I noticed the clock in my gym was broken. So I bought a new clock and I put it up, and I never told anybody because they never fixed the damn clock. They never noticed. And I love that. Who cares? But I just love knowing that I snuck that clock in. That was it was like a $5 IKEA, It's like my little mini adventure. I just love to do stuff like that. I like to pay for the guy, the thing about you pay for the guy behind you in the toll. I just love stuff like that. I love secrets, so it's a Scorpio in me. So but what I want you to do in sharing this, and we'll just use a few minutes, is then after you describe it, talk about how you know through physical sensations that this is something pleasurable for you. And just practice that. That's what we're trying to practice. And in biocognitive psychology, they call the physical sensations or the bodily manifestations signatures. So just to explain, if I use that term, that's what I mean. So just describe the signature of your daily ritual that you enjoy, something, even if it's just to glance up at the trees outside your bedroom window that you love and you just don't think anything of it, but you actually give yourself a hit of beauty every day. It's good to think about those things too and appreciate it. So just if everybody turns to the right and just share that with each other, and we'll just take 5 minutes, so that's a few minutes each. This is another, I'm going to just say so many things that we already know, but like I said, we just need to be reminded about these things. I don't know about you, but I just got such a hit of, I breathed more deeply, and I just went right with you to her wonderful godson saying, how'd you sleep? And their ritual that they share in the morning, and all the things that she does to sort of bring in nature. And it's contagious, right? We know, mirror neurons and all that. And the important part of this is elevated emotions like gratitude are open we're more receptive, they're more expansive, and they're what we can use to heal ourselves, right? So the signature that you were experiencing is the signature that you can use when you're in another place. Not about suppression, repression. It's about a choice of acknowledging where you are here and choosing someplace else, and then we'll talk about methodically how we do that. So now just another little quick thing that we'll do. If everybody could just stand up and with your same partners, just stand where you're comfortably willing to have a conversation with each other. And just check out, I'm sorry, it's kind of a pain, but good for us to move around. And you and I will do this. Now, I just want you to notice the distance. Just notice the distance. Now, just check in with each other. Is this your shared social contract distance for talking with each other? Or is one more comfortable with a little closer or a little farther back? Just have a conversation about it for 2 seconds. And we'll do this. So how was that? Kind of interesting, huh? Yeah, and so did you try to go to an intellectual explanation, which is what we did, of why you had that distance? No. Good for you. I was a bad example. But there doesn't have to be a reason, does there? I went to the dermatologist the other day for my annual or biannual checkup or something, and she was so close to me. I thought, she's in my space, but she's looking at my face. She needs to, you know. So it's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. Okay, so everybody can get comfortable now. So I'm going to pretend that I'm feeling something quite intensely, okay? And I'm going to describe it to you in terms of my signature, and then I want you to just guess what it is, what emotions am I feeling? So my stomach is so tight. I'm holding my breath a little bit, and I feel sort of butterflies in my stomach. And my chest is a little tight, and my breathing is a little bit constricted, and my palms are sweating. What do you think I'm feeling? What emotions? And the cheat sheet is behind me.
Anxiety.
Okay. All right.
Nervous.
Okay, what else?
Scared.
Fear. Okay. Okay.
Sad.
Okay. Yeah? Okay.
Excited.
And what do you think I need? Look at the needs list. I mean, there's no right and wrong, right? So just, because you don't know. You don't know.
Support.
Air, maybe a few deep breaths.
Breathing. Empathy.
I definitely need air.
Security.
To understand.
Stability.
Support.
To be seen.
You know, I didn't write down an explanation for this, but I was just thinking about this because I just wanted us to do something to jump in to actually have some experiences. So this is just not an intellectual discussion. I could be just like I was. I think I got this from what happened to me when I was 15 years old. I was sitting at a someplace where we all gathered, all friends, and this guy I had a crush on came over and whispered in my ear, "I love you." And that was my reaction. It was more than I could handle. But I was happy. I was thrilled. I was excited, you know. Interesting, isn't it? Because those same feelings could have meant somebody cut me off and I thought I was going to hit him. You know, or the deer that ran out in front of my car last night in the crosswalk, I might add. So it's individual and it's also perception, right? And again, we go back to, we need to remind ourselves that our perceptions, especially when we're dealing with other people's perceptions that are giving them a hard time and causing them suffering, is that let's say that we didn't know enough and we were trying to fix them. And, you know, we're all capable of having that at least come up, that we want to. We know better, but we all are capable of having that come up. You may not know, even if it were appropriate for you to fix them, you may not know because you may be seeing the world in a whole other way. And what might be right for you, one man's ceiling is another man's floor, right? Now there are of course universal truths, but even those get pretty technical and pretty complex. It's really interesting. The only universal truth I've ever run into is love. And I don't mean liking. And one of the wonderful things that Marshall Rosenberg talks about is, somebody says, "Do you love me?" Depends on what you mean by love. You mean you don't love me? I said, it depends on what you mean by love. No. You don't love me? No, I just don't like you right now. You mean you love me? Yeah, I love you, but I don't like you right now. So don't ask me to say I love you. I don't love you like that. Like, you know what I mean, like that. Like, I love you, but don't ask me to say that now. So the difference, right? We don't always have to like each other, but that doesn't destroy the love. And that didn't destroy the love for the young woman who, since she was a child bride, had been with this person who controlled every moment of her life. But she still loved this person. So there was nothing that he could do that would prevent that from continuing. Of course, we could have a long discussion about that one too, couldn't we? But we won't go there. So let's see. Well, I wanted to remember to give you one of this example, so I gave myself a cheat sheet. I don't know if you've heard of Bruce Lipton. Has anybody read Bruce Lipton? Well, he talks about the brain in a wonderful way that I love. He says that we have a brain that's, you know, it's got limitations, like a bird's brain can, you know, cause somebody to fly. Well, we can't, our brains don't do that, but our brains do other things. So that's our finite universal brain. Then we have the mind, right? What is the mind, right? And it's this conscious awareness, right, that we don't quite understand. And it gets very mystical and in the realm of the spirit, or whatever our belief system is, to hold meaning and put labels on the experience, which is not actually the experience, right? It's like trying to describe the wind, the experience of the wind to somebody. When I was a little kid, that was my first, when I was about 3 years old, I'm like, oh, I know what God is. It's the wind. So but you can't, that's an implicit preconceptual experience, to experience the wind. So then we put labels on it to describe it, and we're describing the qualities of it. But that's not the wind, right? That's just the symbol of the wind. So we have a universal brain, And then we have this to explain what this is the blackboard. We write on the blackboard. So the conscious awareness sorts information by archetypes, and Carl Jung did a lot of this work, but there's a lot of this in biocognitive psychology too. So that's just how our brains work, and then there are universals to that too. But I love Bruce Lipton because he said, with your brain, your conscious awareness uses the brain to write on the blackboard. Don't blame the blackboard. So when you say, I just can't break this habit, but you've got the habit written on the blackboard. So of course you're going to keep doing it. You have to change what you write on the blackboard, right? And also because we're fish in water, the blackboard exists inside a culture, right? So if your culture says don't go out in the rain or you'll catch a cold, which is my friend went to teach in Mississippi and she called me up and she said, people won't send their kids to school here when it rains. They think they'll get a cold. And I said, well, they might get a cold if they got cold in the rain, but the rain's not gonna hurt them. She said, you can't tell them that, it's the culture. So it is, and how many things do we have culturally written on our brains? So many. So are they wrong? No, they're not wrong. They're just our cultural editors. And they're not entities. They're not a thing that we can blame, right? We say, oh, my brain. Yeah, right. Well, who put it there? Our lives put it there. We're blameless. But we've got to realize that this is indeed a blackboard on an easel, right? We don't want to get confused and think that this is our brain. This is just what is written in our brain by our conceptions of things, by our experiences, and by our culture. So the one place we can go, we can count on to sort all this out is our bodies. And to understand the archetypes in the body really helps us, gives us this subtle information, really helps us sort out what's right for us and wrong for us. And actually this can have a profound effect on our health. So I don't know, I'm sure none of you have done this, but I'll think up some crazy thing and I'll fret about it and I'll just, worry myself sick about it, and then I'll just realize, oh, that was stupid, I don't know why I was thinking that. So here comes the judgment. Well, I was thinking that because I was taught to think that. Oh, yeah, I was taught to think that, but I actually don't think that way. Oh, yeah, I don't think that way, do I? I'm free. I'm no longer worried about whatever that was, So there's that process. And automatically judgment or anger or pushback comes in. Remember what Antonio Damasio said that Grandma knew, that like any new information, there's pushback. Well, that's a natural part of the brain, the older part of the brain, right? Saying, danger, danger, new information, look out, could be, it's a threat to our survival. I mean, any little thing, okay? Just low level. But it can be so low level that you don't even notice the tightness in your stomach. You don't even notice you're curling your toes. and if we start to notice those things, then we have much more information and we're at choice. And that's the whole point of it. So I wanted to just, let's see, I'll go through my cheat sheets with you here a little bit. So you don't have to look at this anymore unless you just want to. But that now you know what the 4 chairs looks like. We'll try to get to that if we have time. But then I'm gonna go through this right now because I don't know how far I'm gonna get into the other material, and I don't wanna cheat you this, because this is sort of the foundation of nonviolent communication. It starts here, we call it Offner. And it sounds weird, I'm just so used to hearing this, I don't think you can have it. And when I first started studying this, I used to carry 4 little pebbles around in my pocket to remind me of observations, feelings, needs, and requests. And I call it the 4 Noble Truths. This is truly the 4 Noble Truths, and they all fit. And I just think it's kind of an elegant explanation of where this goes. That we, of course, we're not in charge of the world, so suffering happens to all of us, and we all have been trained about this, that we can't help what happens to us, but then we can process it so that we're not remaining victims, right? We can free ourselves of the experience by processing it, giving ourselves empathy, getting the support and the help we need, and then moving on with our lives. Or we can use it and remain victims. That's a problem too. But for the most part, we can't control the things that happen to us. However, just like my example of what I would do culturally, is first one realizes that one causes most of one's own suffering needlessly. Of course, not all of it, but we do, because we fret and we get wrong-headed about things. And second one looks for the reasons in one's own life. So there's the benevolent look at, oh, well, let's look, why do you feel that way? Like you're being your own best friend, really deeply listening. And how many times have we had that delicious, long, cool drink when we're thirsty of someone really listening to us? It's priceless, isn't it? It's just priceless. It's the most important thing we have to give. Caring about each other, right? That's what makes the connection, right? So looking like that is observing for these feelings and needs. And third, to look is to have confidence in one's own ability to end that suffering, because then we're turning to our internal resources. And so much suffering is caused from trying to get our needs met only in the outside world, and often specifically from one person, when maybe it could be from many other people. And couples a lot of times have that issue, like only their partner is supposed to fulfill their needs, and maybe you need to go to the movies with your neighbor. And then finally, a wish arises to find the path to peace, for all beings desire happiness, all wish to find their pure selves. We have the capacity, right, inside. We have this rich, set of internal resources. And I want to just interrupt right here and say, because all of you know this is part of your training. Insight into what some of the big problems in life is a lot of work, and it takes a lot of stamina, and we need support, and that's the work you're all doing. You're part of that support network, and yet we also need to have that support network for ourselves. Number one, internally, and then on the outside, right? Very, very important. Before, during, and after. That's what attracted me to restorative justice, is because there's that belief that you need to get support before something, during it, and after. From your colleagues, friends, family. Doesn't have to be just professionally. But that in this difficult process that we all face as human beings, a certain amount of distraction, let's pick addictions, because that's a good example. If you have an addictive mind, and you move that addictive quality to let's say it's alcoholism, to exercising, and you become addicted to exercising, is that a negative? It can turn into one, but not necessarily. Because it's easier to go exercise and move, especially when anxiety kicks in and that fight or flight low level. So a certain amount of distraction is not an unhealthy thing. It's just a way to cope, right? And then it can bring about, as greater resources are learned to be utilized inside, to turn more to the introspection, which takes more stamina. And it just takes a little higher level of maturity. So that when we observe what's going on, we're gonna have judgments. Nonviolent communication says, don't have judgments here, and I don't buy that. Yeah, right. How do you stop them? You can't stop them. They come in. They're like they're like the unwanted little visitors that crawl in. So you treat them with respect, but you're in charge, and then you invite them to move on. But you use them to look at everything that you feel. And then feelings point to our needs. They're like arrows to our needs. If we just feed the feelings, they can turn into little monsters. But feelings are really important. When you hear about somebody who's had, I forget the neurologic disorder where the capacity to decide on an emotional basis is erased, and the person will stand in a cereal aisle. There's no emotion. So this person can be overwhelmed by the choice. And we think that that's just a logical choice. Well, this one has too much salt, this one, no. It's all intertwined with our emotions. That's the decision-making process, right? That's the neurology behind it. So these are really important. And we never want to say, oh, feelings, we don't, they're only useful to tell us what we need. That's not true. They're part of it, but they are the arrows. And then what is this request thing? Has anybody studied nonviolent communication in here? Okay, well, request sounds really strange to some people, but in the 4 chairs, if this person that I described to you came over here, if she just barged in and said, I have to talk to you, there would be no request, and it would be disrespectful, right? So she made a request of this person before she went back to her husband to talk with her. And then she made another request that the person listen to try to understand where she was from, because she was very upset with her. She didn't want to talk with her. And the request was to not forgive her. She wasn't asking for forgiveness, because then she's asking for something from her, and she's already asked to just given an audience that she didn't want. So it wasn't forgiveness. She said she just wanted to give her regrets and her remorse about losing her temper with her. So that was a request to let her share that. So there was 2 requests in that. If you, I can't think of another example, maybe some of you can, where you've had something happen and you have something that you need to fulfill one of your needs. Then instead of just describing it, you ask for something that will help you get what you need from the other person. This can also work inside yourself. Last night I said, you know how you sleep through that other alarm? Can I request that you set your iPhone so you wake up? So internally too, right? So, and often, I brought up the distraction thing because, these formulas for life, right? Well, they're the examples of what we might try to roughly follow, but all of this has a soft edge, right? None of this is in a box. Life is not in a box. And I'm preaching to the choir, as they say. But it might mean that we need faith or patience or courage here to even get to the point where we're willing to make a request for ourselves internally or of somebody else. But then that gives the person, let's say the person has broken your favorite cup. You drink your coffee out of this cup every morning and you're the only one who uses it, and so there was a sort of an assumption that nobody else used it. And you get up in the morning and it's broken, right? Well, then maybe there needs to be a request there. So you can just get that cleared up, right? So just whatever the request is, and then the other person feels better. Like, well, can you go see if you can find me a cup that's the same size, that's really pretty, or, something. And then the person feels better. Oh, okay, now I can do something. I'm not just being condemned. It's a sort of a forgiving move, right? So that's where the requests are. And then when we do all this, if we do it with a sense of shared power, and not to fix, but just to try to understand each other, then it's a great shortcut. So anybody have any questions about this process? Does this make sense to you? And the language can be a little funny sometimes, but if you ask for what somebody's feeling, and including yourself, you can just guess. And just guessing at what somebody feels means you care, means you give a damn. Doesn't mean that you have to be accurate. And like we were saying, our perceptions are so all over the place, you never know. But if you guess, you're showing you care, and then you really listen. And if it was my cup that got broken, how would I be feeling? Not fulfilled. No, definitely aroused. I don't see anything. One of the things this reminds me is you often won't see anger listed on one of these nonviolent communication lists because Rosenberg considered anger a mixture of unmet needs. He didn't think of anger as a need. And I think that's true of a lot of things because if you start to look at your emotions, you have a primary emotion, and when we were all just sharing a while ago, we were feeling gratitude. That primary emotion will soften the other emotions that are going on underneath. So you can't really feel the sadness about the ding you got in your car yesterday because you're too filled with the gratitude, which is a really good thing for us to remember about those kinds of emotions. And so let's see. Let me see if I can start here. Ooh, I'm sorry, Fan.
I feel like I just had an aha moment.
Sure.
So
Let's do aha.
when you're talking about the feelings and needs, so I'm thinking and translating this to, let's say I'm talking with a client. I was just sharing our last class that we did a lot of hands-on experience working with each other, pretending to be clients and and therapists. So I could see even in that setting, if I'm speaking to one of my clients and they're telling me, I'll go ahead and pick one. You know what? I feel, I'll just say scared. I don't know if scared's on there because feelings. I feel scared every time, I come outside and I get this anxiety that something's going to happen. If they're telling me these verbal cues and I'm hearing it, and I could say, all right, again, repeating it back to them, it sounds like you feel scared because this is going to happen. Internally in my mind, I know it's connected. Well, they have a need. They need to be met. So I'm not going to verbally say to them, okay, well, your need is X, Y, Z. But in my mind, I'm saying, she
No
feels scared.
diagnoses. Yeah.
Her need is security. It sounds like then we need to come up with a plan that makes you feel more secure.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. If they say, they're feeling any emotion, I could connect it to, well, what is the need I need to try to, my curiosity is hearing your feelings, guessing it, and what's the need that needs to be met.
So you validated the emotion,
Right,
right? And then you can guess the need.
right. And even if I'm not getting it like verbatim, I'm getting in that realm of, wow, this therapist is understanding the need because I don't know how to articulate for this.
So you're scared.
Yeah.
You think it's security that you feel is lacking.
Mhm.
Yeah, and if y'all are exposed to nonviolent communication out there, you might hear some sort of parroted phrase, "Are you feeling because you need?" And I would encourage you to avoid that like a plague. Because it's kind, it's this has been around now long
Right.
enough
Right.
that that's kind of known, and you won't sound like you care,
Right.
and you will. And I think it's often that people we this happens when we gain a new skill set.
Mhm.
We're eager to use it, and we just want to use our language, and we love it, and it's just like, oh, well, that's like, go practice on somebody else and then that you really love, and they'll give you feedback. So it's hard, but I like the way you're putting this.
Right.
And it's a slippery slope because we can immediately get mechanical too and go in our heads and start thinking, let's
That's
see
true.
that feelings list or that, and I've done this. I've had the feelings and needs listed, and I've been, talking about it. And then I just realize I'm doing it, and I put them down and listen. Because then it's a kind of funny insecurity.
Mhm.
Like, I don't need to look at this list.
Right.
I know what feelings are, I have them. I know what needs are, I have them.
Mhm.
So sometimes it's just being present,
Mhm.
right? And that's more important than any of your accurate or inaccurate guesses, right?
Right.
You're there, and our bodies pick up that very thing. And I always include trauma in what I talk about because we all deal with it. And trauma is physical, and to be trauma informed is to be aware of our body state, of our signatures, and how they're affected by the people we're working with, and by ourselves, and by our families, all of us. And so in this way, I really believe that using this nonviolent communication formula inside, if the formula is not used in a formulaic way, if it's comes from the heart, then it's violence prevention. On the scale of not giving yourself enough good nutrition, not getting enough sleep, sort of self-care, benign neglect, and we sometimes have to choose that. Say an emergency, you kind of sometimes have to choose that. All the way to environmental degradation and genocide. I mean, that's the long line, right, of what turns into violence to chaotic mayhem. So we all know that. And our awareness is body-based. So you have no idea how happy I am to see this whole realm of social science turning back to what our ancestors already knew.
Mhm.
I do something called EFT. I do a version called triad tapping. It's not new. It's a 1,000-year-old self-soothing technique that uses repetitive tapping that in acupuncture is called a tonifying technique. And I hear people too, I heard a trauma expert say, and so wrote this book and coined the term felt knowledge. Just laughed. They've been talking about this for 1,000 years in Asia. Nobody coined that term. So anyway, it's just funny. We just think we have to be the inventors, right? But this is all ancient wisdom that's body-centered that we're just getting back in touch with, thank goodness. So is the paradigm shifting? I think so in many ways. That we're gonna be talking about this, the negative reinforcement of repetition of traumatic stories. We're gonna talk about why that's there's a time that they need to be retold, that seems to be healing, that seems to be a universal. More than once, and this can't be a formula, but more than once, you can get yourself in big trouble. So if there's time, we'll try to talk about that. And then the components of the internal, external safety work and the vital role played by breathing. Well, breathing is your number one key. And by the way, if you do yoga, how many people do yoga in here? If your yoga instructor never talks about breathing, you're in an exercise class.
You are, exactly.
So, and then I don't think we're gonna have time for this, but I'm sure everybody's had training in trauma where in trauma you're stuck in a shock. And you're not able to grieve, because the grieving is a process, right? Which dissipates over time. I don't know about closure, I don't like that word, but so we know that if we have a little time, we'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about alternative to retelling the story. But and I just put love and fear here because it seems like this is like a universal, this is what we're trying to choose now, and this is body centered, right? When you love someone, you feel it, right? We say you feeling loving. Yeah, that's right. We are. So in talking about this and in talking about how we go through this shift of any kind where it's new information that comes in here and our first reaction is negative, that's programmed into our brains. We can expect that, and we don't have to self-condemn when that happens. We just handle it. And we know that what we're going through is our little mini, teeny weeny personal paradigm shift. Oh, I don't like using my iPhone. I live in a loft. I have a bedroom that's a loft, so I have to climb up a ladder. I don't like taking my iPhone up there. I'm gonna drop it if I'm sleepy. I don't like it next to me, So I had to have a little mini paradigm shift to use mine because, I was up late last night, so I knew I might sleep in my alarm. But, or, massive, really important paradigm shifts. So, and we know this, but it's just good to think about it. It's good to have it, because what I'm asking you to do, if I would be surprised if any of this is new to any of you, but it still may be that because of the culture we live in, it's a bit of a shift to focus so much on the body. So what I'm asking is for a bit of a paradigm shift. And this works across in our bodies and in cultures as well, where the first thing is, no, that's ridiculous. Disdain, disbelief, fear, whatever. Fear comes from the natural thing of not wanting to change because it might be threatening, but it also just status quo, culture. We get cultural editors in here, and when you're in the trauma stage, this is where you're in the shock stage, and there's dissociation, there's immobility, and this is where you're stuck in the lizard brain and you're repeating things. So even though we technically know the past is non-existent, our brain doesn't, because our brain is memory. So if we're not closely paying attention out here in the ethers, with our conscious awareness, looking at what we've written on the blackboard, we're going to believe that we're in that past. And that's what happens when you're stuck in the shock phase. Because the amygdala doesn't know past, present, future. It doesn't tell time. Nobody took the iPhone in there. But so this is important to understand this, because we get stuck in it on a regular basis, and then we need to go through the process. So this is a thinking process too that we can bring through to where we're being able to live a theory and embody it. We come to what we truly know. And I don't know if I'm putting this in the place where I should or shouldn't, but I think maybe the most profound knowing that I got out of studying all this is something that I have been curious about my entire life. And that is, how do you go from, let's say I read a book and I read something that I think is profound. And it's just a profound truth. And I'm moved by it. And then I go on, I live my life, and I forget about that profound truth. I forget that it struck me, that I had emotions about it, that I had insight, because it stayed at the level of the intellectual. I didn't do anything with it. And what this work, this is just based on the neuroscience, is that what shifts something up, this is really important for me in my life, that if I repeat something over and over again, and I'm thinking about this book that I didn't mention, I read the same book every morning, one passage in it. And the reason I do that, I've been doing it for years, is because when you repeat something, it moves it from an intellectual knowing to felt experience. So we have to look out for what we're practicing. Because we become what we practice. And when you see somebody, and it's heartbreaking, I know you guys have seen this, y'all have seen this, that when somebody's caught in haunting memories, when they're caught in the shock phase of trauma, it's the gerbil wheel, and they can't get off. And they know it. They often know it. They know it doesn't make sense, and they know it's illogical. It's not, you can't reason someone out of trauma. It's insulting. They already know. They're already stuck where the reason can't get. So what they're repeating, they're stuck in. And you know, fortunately we're learning how to relieve people of that. But this is also where you get cultural shifts in that kind of, I grew up in Texas, and no offense to Texas, but I came away from Texas with I ran away from Texas with some quite dysfunctional racist scripts that ran in my head. And I didn't even know they ran in my head until I was confronted with them. And then I realized, oh my God, I don't think that. I don't believe that. Who's thinking this? Well, it's in that stream of consciousness. And then there was, this shame, but then there was insight. Well, I didn't put it there. Now I own it. I can do something about it, right? So this is a big category right here. This is where right and wrong lives, good and bad and all that. It's a dominant paradigm. But then this is where the wall starts to crumble. And in trauma, that's when people can enter the grief stage. And they're building capacity to have agency, to be able to accept what they've been through. And then, this is where it's like, it's like, no, that doesn't exist. Galileo, poor Galileo, right? How long did it take him before they, and then, maybe, yeah, I heard that too. I know that's the truth. Yeah, of course, what were you thinking back there? So acceptance, right? And that's the healing stage. And then that's where the amygdala hijack ends, and the healing begins. Now, forgive me for this, is a little alarming, but because of the crowd I have here, and because nonviolent communication is not just an intellectual process, one of the reasons that it's important to be in touch with your body is because sometimes there are real dangers, not just being stuck in the amygdala, and we need to know. And we need to be able to read our, when we say gut feeling, and we need to have in place what to do if something does happen. And in this world of the kind of targeted violence that we get, those of you who are getting placements, you need to find out what their safety plan is. And what's your backup? And be aware of your physical environment. One of the things that I train in is violent critical incident management. These things are really important. And if people brush you off and say, well, this never happened here. No. Remember the paradigm shift, disdain? They're not there yet. Nobody thinks it's going to happen to them. So, and these things are really rare. Should we not prepare for them? Well, of course we should prepare for them. Should we dwell on them and repeat the fear of them? Obviously not. But one of the ways that you don't push this down, you don't suppress, is by just acknowledging that it's a 1 in a million and you've got a plan. And one of the things that I learned working in emergency services is, you know, everybody has a plan that works in emergency services. Do you remember it? Do you follow it? No. But you think you know what to do. So you act on your instincts. And you have just enough presence of mind because your pea brain has written on the blackboard, I know what to do. You don't know what to do because every situation is different. But the brain is full, so the brain is relatively calm and you act on instinct. You act on your body-centered awareness of what the situation is because it always changes. And in a targeted violence situation, it can change in seconds. So you want to ask something?
Yes, I wanted to ask you something.
Please.
So I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. So just because you have inquired and received the information, when the emergency situation happens,
Yeah.
just knowing that had occurred is going to make you calm enough to act on instinct versus maybe get rid of a little panic? Is that what you're saying?
If you
Because you
know,
said you don't remember that. Of course you don't. You're not going to remember
yeah, well, you
exactly
do
all
and
the
you
steps
don't.
you're
I mean,
supposed to take.
that I'm.
You're
That's
saying
the trouble
just a
with
little-
language, it's limited, it's not the actual experience. So
Right.
if you practice to, let's say you, the first thing I ever did in emergencies was train to be a lifeguard. Who's trained to be a lifeguard in here? It was scary, wasn't it? I thought I was gonna drown. But, it was really scary. I think they kind of went
Be a
over.
lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
I was too young to know that.
But then I was actually faced with my own son nearly drowning. Did I think about that training? No, but it was in there because I had practiced it.
Oh, so you're
So
saying,
I acted without having to think about it because it was practice, and thank goodness.
Right.
So that's what I mean. It's not. It moves out of the intellectual and it becomes felt knowledge.
Yeah.
So then you're responding in present tense, and that's the most important thing. And that's why you really need to have some kind of plan. You need to have. And it is really important to discipline yourself not to dwell on anything. And especially when you hear the news of things like that, just spend a moment breathing into it, expand, taking that in, honor how it feels, because just witnessing your emotions helps them dissipate. It's when we don't have time for them that we get in trouble. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking of automatically things kicking in, 2 incidences. One when I was a lifeguard and there were swimming lessons going on, and I would walk periodically around the pool.
Yeah.
And there were too many kids for one person, and they were
Yeah.
usually young volunteers. Like I was being paid, but I was young too. And I just happened to be walking by with one child started to slip under, and I didn't think. I stepped on the step, I pulled the child out, I pointed it out to the teacher, and then I just continued on,
You just kept walking.
and I
right?
shook afterwards. And the other one was, as a young mom, I would go to these team pinning family practice things with big barbecues and everything. And this one grandmother wanted to take a picture of her grandson, who was maybe not even 2, on top of a horse. And I heard it, and it wasn't my business to intervene, but I was right there, and I noticed something had fallen off the bleachers that we were by, and I was standing, and I always had my kids in the Oshkosh by gosh little cross things, and you can grab them very easily there. And that this baby had that on, and I noticed the horse was gonna spin. It was scared and it was gonna spin. And I just my body remembers this. I grabbed the Oshkosh and I put the baby under and I ducked, and the horse's legs went right over me, and he was bucking. And you don't, it was all done without thinking.
my
And
God.
after I was like handed the baby back and I'm like, maybe that's not a good idea. And I just started shaking. I realized, you know, that was completely unmet. So that was like, my training was I knew I could grab those cross things.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it's important that I think it's important to practice and then compartmentalize, so you don't deny it, but you also don't run around repeating it. And it's really good to know the power of that, isn't it? That repetition is so powerful. And then we take it seriously. And we'll talk about how the brain decides what needs to get repeated too. But I just wanted to say this, that you know, I mean, there's a whole training that goes into this, but you know you can't constrain somebody, right? You know there's no need to be a martyr or a hero, right? And that it's time for you to have a collaborative expert group that can handle a situation, that has already practiced together what to do, just to stay safe. It's a really good idea. And it's not at all paranoid to just casually get in the habit of just being aware of your surroundings. It's really important, Heather, to be aware of your physical surroundings all the time. It's just a nice safety practice. You know where the exits are, know where the windows open, you know where you can get out and they don't open, just things like that. So now this is the heart of what we're going to be talking about in these portals. Like I said, we have a universal physical brain, and then we have a mind that works in archetypes. And the information, because we're biological beings, the information comes in as biosymbolic. And if you think about this, these are universal portals that they work across all cultures. They differ somewhat, but I feel it in my gut. It hurts my heart. Oh, I have a tension headache. No. I'm tongue-tied. I have a catch in my throat. What do those things mean? What are we saying? We kind of understand what we're saying, right? Just by describing the signature. Well, safety and danger are a bimodal portal. They're for social and emotional safety and physical safety. And let's say it starts at the feet and comes up to around the belly. That's our safety area in our body, where we feel it. And if you're getting ready to I don't know, go someplace, my son and I used to rock climb together. And we were at a place called Smith Rock, and we had just switched leads. And he said, I have this gut feeling. And I said, what? He said, I don't know. I said, pack your gear, we're leaving. Why? I don't know why. But your body is picking up something. There may be a predator near. I don't know. I don't know what you're feeling, but we're honoring it. We're here in the middle of nowhere. We're leaving. So you get those things. We're critters, right? So, and we live in a world where this is a balance. We can't pretend that we live in we could be in a completely safe, 100% all the time, la land. No, it's a balance. It's a healthy balance that we all, because we live. Watch the antelope, right? Grazing right next to the lions that eat them when they know the lions aren't hungry. They graze right next to them. They're relaxed. They instinctively know they're not hungry. It's amazing, really amazing. And then the next portal, obviously, around the heart, the whole area here. And then expression, well, look at me. Why do you think I was Italian? So expression is the arms, the throat, the face, the eyes, all this is how we express. And then this is how we suppress, right? We know, it's that language of expression suppression. And then we think of peace of mind, right? Well, is it peace of brain? No, it's peace of mind. It's it's more than what we've written on the blackboard. It's more than how the conscious awareness uses the brain. It's in that area that we call conscious awareness that's beyond my understanding. But if we are able to recognize these portals, then we're able to recognize how, because we're a whole being, how this is the opening. This is where the information comes in, or where it manifests. So these are manifest portals of what we're feeling from internal or external, implicit or explicit. And when we can recognize this, then we have the information we need to activate our internal resources, right? So these are really important. And how's everybody doing? Do you need to take a break before we start talking about the brain? Are you okay? You wanna wait till 11 and take a Starbucks break? Is that what I heard? Okay, all right. Any questions so far, John? I try not to be such a talking head. And I wanted to just make sure you're getting what you need out of this. Any questions, anybody have? Sure, Sam.
I have a question, I don't know how much, you can help me with this, but, when the word safety is like super important when it comes to clients that I have who are like 5150.
Yeah.
I recently got a case, without saying too much information, just, this little girl just super, intense 5150s like every other day. I think the last hold was like 2 weeks. And
Her last hold was 2
Yeah, her
weeks.
last
Yeah, that's a
hold.
long time.
and I believe she had like, cut her wrist and, luckily she's still okay. But I've recently had a lot of clients who've been diagnosed with MDD. And I don't know if it's like, I'm just being very honest.
Yeah.
Like, I think those are the hardest clients to work with sometimes, because how can you make someone see the light at the end of the tunnel when they feel like so, it's kind of like it feels like you're scratching the surface and you're trying, but I'm wondering how much of this can I use to not only build like a safety plan or like a treatment goal, like, you'll be able to express yourself more frequently, like from 1 to 3 times a week. I really wanna be able to help people who are in those situations
And are not living in their bodies.
yes.
Yeah.
And I guess, I don't wanna go into the whole like fixing thing, because you can get pretty lost in like what you explained in your first case, like you put a lot of work into stuff and then sometimes the result could be the same, but at least, how can I take some of these techniques and be able to apply them to where I can at least help somebody be more aware of these things?
And I'm happy to come back in October, maybe we'll try to address some of that. Apparently I am coming back in October, so you guys can give me a wish list, but, well, one thing that you can do is work with somebody that's not a fix, it's just allowing them, and the whole thing about pendulation and going through the resetting of the emotions, and it has a rhythm, right? But you can just simply help someone breathe and be grounded in their bodies, and make sure that they're aware that they're sitting with a chair with their back against the wall, where they feel there's not a door behind them. They can see the door. You don't block their all these things are critter things, right? So you treat them a little bit like you don't tell them this, but you treat them a little bit like a wild animal. So they can see that they're free, they can leave, and then you help them with your language, ground and feel the temperature in the room. You just take them through their physical sensations and just talk with them about it and just help them breathe, just being in their bodies. And now you're talking about trauma work, really. And it's good for us to know how this works, but I just don't think it's necessary this goes back to nonviolent communication. Being there and listening, witnessing for someone is healing. Trying to diagnose or teach is not. It may be helpful, but it's not usually healing. Unless that person has requested. So it's it's one of those things, it's not, there's no formula. But, and I came from a world where my training was not about mutuality, not about shared agreements. And you never disclosed at all, ever, under any circumstances. You were the non-human entity that was. But it's what you're doing when you're working with someone who's compromised like that is a huge responsibility. And we all do want to fix people. Let's face it, we want them to be well. But the best thing that we can do, I think, is love them and model what that is. And be there for them, treating them with respect and with care and connecting with them. Because that connection, they'll begin to be able to give you what they need. They're the experts, right? They are absolutely, I don't care what kind of wreck they are, they're the experts in their own lives. And when we honor that, we honor them and we're modeling for them to honor themselves. And working with folks like that, oh my gosh, I have so many stories now, I promise not to start. But it's important for us to understand that these signatures of our own bodies is how we can develop our own, I know this is in the zeitgeist, but I still like it, so I still use it, our self-care rituals. And it just, for us to get through the turmoil or the turbulence of working with people who are chaotic, then we need to maintain our capacity for self-compassion ourselves. And in doing that, we need to realize that we need to be able to do this pendulation back and forth, right? Of emotional self-regulation. And it's part of the foundation of building good self-worth. And we need to know how we might sabotage that. And here's where that repetition comes in. So if I wish I could think of a good example, but in our repeated thoughts, emotions, deeds, and speech, the deeds and speech comes as a result of our thoughts and emotions. Then if it's negative, then we're just negatively reinforcing. If it's positive, we're positively reinforcing. But what happens when we start to repeat something? Like, think about this, riding a bicycle becomes, do you think about it? You just get on it. It's already gone in there into a behavioral code, a conduct code, so you don't have to think about how to ride a bicycle. Well, the same thing happens with our assumptions, unfortunately, if they're not good ones. I feel like this is a blueprint of how racism happens and other kinds of prejudice. Is first, something's repeated. You hear something that's racially motivated around you in your culture, and it's negative, and it's repeated over and over again. Well, when anything is repeated, the brain starts to say, oh, red alert, this is being repeated. That means it must be about survival. And then it starts to look for the meaning. And it starts to rationalize that meaning. Well, then here comes the cultural editors. So you're filtering all that through the cultural editors, where already is like a fog screen. And then if it's being repeated, then you have the sense of urgency that the brain is telling you, oh, this is about survival. You need to keep repeating this. And then it just puts on whatever meaning is there in the culture or in the family. We could see this so at work with the young woman who'd been with her husband for 23 years as basically a captive. And it was not even, she was really smart, but she couldn't believe she didn't even see what it was like. It was just so a part of her culture and her way of living that she wasn't seeing it anything like the way we were seeing it. So it was good for us to realize that and be really respectful of that. But, so, what do when the brain is just picking up these meanings? Well, then what happens is, then when you get this red alert in your system, and the dog starts barking, then the system starts to react. You start getting cortisol shooting up. But if what we learned from the brain is, if you can catch those repetitions that start to happen, and they start to happen at threat almost immediately, or even low-level anxiety. If you find you're going to go talk to somebody and you're not sure how it's going to go, you're probably practicing that in your brain as you walk in. So it doesn't have to be red alert. It can also just be low-level anxiety, and a good thing to practice that. But whatever meaning is in there, if we can catch that meaning within the first few hours, let's say after a trauma, that's when we can do something about the meaning going unconscious. Because then it's harder. You can get to it still, fortunately, because we know from epigenetics, the culture is more powerful than the genes, but genes are also in there, but they can be changed, and so can our emotional code. So we can get at this unconscious material. Well, I don't believe in the unconscious, so that below the surface of awareness material, we can get there, but it's tedious. It takes a long time. If we can catch it in the first few hours, that keeps it from sinking down into, okay, well, this is why it happened, and this is what the reason is, which may not be true. Goes into the conduct code in the brain, and then that's where it moves from short-term memory to long-term memory, and then it sinks down below where you can decide whether you believe that bullshit or not. Then it's sitting in the amygdala where you can't get to it, and where it doesn't have space or time. It doesn't know that it's not the actual experience. It's just the memory. It is only a memory. It is not the past. The past doesn't exist, but the amygdala doesn't know it. The only part of us that knows it is our conscious awareness, thank goodness. So, but then this finishes, it turns into, a cognitive code. So it goes from brain code to cognitive code. And now this is just the way we think. Well, that's just the way it is. What do you mean? No. Then we think we know something that's the truth. And all it is really is this process. And you know what? It works to keep us safe, but it also works to wreak havoc and cause a lot of suffering if we don't understand this and we don't catch it in time. So it's really important that and this is actually from Restorative Justice, but I love this. It's a book called Common Shock. And it's really good for folks who do the kind of work that you do, where it's so important that we know what's going on inside our own bodies, how we're responding, because we co-author everything. When we're sitting in a room with someone, we're co-authoring the presence in that room, right? And we're responsible for it. So we really need to be aware. We so need to be aware, because that's empowering. And it's not only empowering for us, but it's empowering for the people that we work with too. Then we're able to truly work with them in a collaborative way. But we can also give them high support, and there can be both high support and high control, both. And they may need hospitalization. They may need that kind of high control. But they also need high support, so they need to be in an environment where they're getting, there's somebody seeing them all the time. Things like that. And this is really dangerous, because if we're the authority figure, and we all know that in every culture, authority figures have power, and there can be an imbalance of power when you're the authority figure and you're not aware of yourself, or you're not aware of your power. You're not aware of what culturally you're seen as the person who's going to tell someone what to do. Well, guess who gets to blame then? Takes the blame if what they do, well, you told me to do that. That's a simplistic way of looking at it, but you know what I mean. So this is where you can do real harm. And oh my gosh, we see this so much in social services. You know, it's just heartbreaking, some of the things we see here. So then if you're aware and you're disempowered, then what happens? You're aware that you're not getting shared responsibility, you're not being given choice. You're just being shoved around. And you're aware of it. Well, that's where we have revolutions, right? And that's where we have trauma set in too, and domestic violence happens here too. And then this is really bad because we're both unaware and disempowered here. So this is also where trauma and domestic violence live. And then we can sink into a victim mentality. And this is, we can feel like we can't move. And then we can get stuck in these survivalistic patterns. And we can also catastrophize. And so I just put this list of things to avoid, and you're not expected to read my writing. But so we want to try to never reason with somebody, right, who's not empowered themselves, and they may be stuck in trauma, because you can't reason someone out of their trauma. It doesn't work that way. And we have to get out of our heads. And we've learned, this is just an honorable mention here, but we've learned that critical incident debriefing does not work. It's not a good thing to do that. And in most cases, especially with physical abuse, it's not a good thing. And then we just need to avoid any rigid thinking, or again, we talked about this, you don't get into a teaching mode here. You're there to be first and foremost, and remember there's no formulas for this. It's your own instincts about what's needed that's in front of you. But we don't come like, oh, well now I know what you should do, or I know what I should lead them to do, and we in our caring, your example is reminding me, I've been in that situation where I just wanted to give something to someone. I felt so helpless. What can I do for this person? But I didn't realize then that what I could do was just be there for them. Just be present and listen and give a damn. That was really empowering to just be there. And people in that state have such good radar for that, right? They know. And then we can just embrace quiet modeling for safety and to remain warmly neutral and caring. And if they need something that's beyond our expertise, we have that set up ahead of time. We know who to turn to ourselves, and we have our own compassionate way of handling it for ourselves. And be aware of how we just all need to embrace safety for people first, because if you're in a state of some kind of arousal, you're not going to be able to learn anyway. That's not a state where, the arousal can even be hunger. I mean, you can't teach somebody philosophy when they're starving. We have that problem with kids that go to school and they don't have proper breakfast. And, I don't know why we don't fix that, but this is just an honorable mention is. Have you heard of the restorative justice questions, the standard restorative justice questions that are around? Okay, well that another time, but the most important thing you can do then is just to be able to give somebody choice, because that's empowering, right? In your dealings with them, and if you're dealing with a whole group, any of you do group work? Anybody doing group work? Well, in doing group work, it's really good to not just have the primary person running a group, but having someone else there who's trained, who can just observe. Because it depends on the situation, but you can have a group where somebody's going to, and trauma is unpredictable, right? So somebody's starting to have a reaction, or they leave the room and they're gone for a long time. Go check on it. The second person goes and they finds out they're throwing up in the bathroom. So you monitor people, and you can guide people if they're starting to tell a traumatic story, and you can set this up ahead of time too with the group, is the questioning can be about what happened after the tragedy or after the event, so that they can still address it, but they're not taking the entire group through the retelling of what happened to them. It can be bad for them, it can be bad for the group, you can have a big mess on your hands really quick, depending on who this is. And this is the hardest when you have a group of veterans. But that gets a little bit tricky when they all want to share their stories. And then that depends on, so many other factors. I probably shouldn't have brought that up. But just when you're working in groups, it's really good to have two of you, and one's just the observer, just so you can pick that up. And so you can handle the group, and then the other person can pull other people aside if they need it. It's just really good self-care, and it's good care for the group too. So, because there's just too much going on in the world. And again, you want to have a sort of 911 plan. If something gets out of hand, you want to already have talked about it and what you're going to do. If you end up with a 911 call on your hands or something, and just to talk about that ahead of time, instead of just saying, well, this never happens. Well, maybe it doesn't. Good. You haven't wasted any time. You're just being prepared. So in terms of practitioner self-care, just the body-centered self-care. First, if you set your intentions, and then you just watch your breathing and your eye contact and your focus, and then you move into the more elevated emotions so that you have openness and authenticity and warmth. And we're going to do some practicing on how you can shift from, those bimodal portals we were talking about. If you're feeling a sense of danger, you check your body and you check, it's an implicit, explicit check, and if it's from an old memory, what you can do with that, we'll talk about that in a minute. But just to be aware of your resources, we all have our internal resources, and they need to be practiced, right, every day. That's why I love starting out with what we, before you came in, we were all talking about what's like a mini ritual or a mini adventure we give ourselves every day. Maybe we don't even think about it, that we really enjoy, and then we just shared it, and we talked about our physical sensations, just to start out to get involved in what we're talking about here. It was really fun. And then I think you could feel it in the room, that just kind of everybody felt really good. It was kind of uplifting. So it's very powerful. So these are the externals. You can do all these things. Meditation is a good one. That when you're dealing with people who sometimes can't do this, then in talking with people about asking them what they do, prompting them, be careful about suggestions, because I'm sure you know this, that not everybody can meditate. It's just too much. Like we say, they're going to need a distraction phase that doesn't last too long and isn't permanent. But dissociation we learned, and distractions we've learned, there's a reason the brain does this. It's for healing. And as long as it's managed and it doesn't go on for too long, and there's measured ways we've observed this, that you might not be able to sit still and contemplate your navel right away. So Tai Chi, Qigong, I misspell Qigong, it's Qi. Yoga, those things are wonderful. These are just things that can be not taught or fixed, but they can, these are sort of with other people, they're explorations. Well, what did you enjoy as a kid? This is your business. So, but all these things, and we can think about these things are ways that we get out of our heads and we use our bodies. We become whole human beings when we do these things. So good for us, so necessary, and it also changes our way of thinking, and because we're biological beings in a biological world, in a physical world. When we're outside, we change. Have you ever noticed how you feel much better when you've gone for a walk? Don't ask me to explain that, I don't know, but I just know that it's really important. And that somehow that we start to use in our senses more parts of the brain. And like you were explaining, if you were talking about beauty or whatever your experience, or your great latte that tasted, you were using more of your physical sensations in this broader experience of using your body, and because of that, it's calming. You're not stuck in the amygdala. You're not stuck in these loops. And then, internal, these are the things that you can turn to, and each one of these has their own signature. Of course, like we say, the emotions we have many different emotions, but we'll have a primary emotion or two.
Are you saying when your client does not have any of these resources?
Check in.
Explore their resources available.
Have any of you struggled with trying to balance this yourself?
All the time.
Thank you. Who could not say that, right? Of course. That's so great. That's such a healthy thing to see everybody's head shake in the whole room. Yeah, I'm in good shape here. I think we're going to end up having time for this, but this is, it's Starbucks time and I went 5 minutes over, sorry. So let's take a break. What time do you usually come back from your break?
15 minutes.
15 minutes? Okay, so let's get back here at 11 years. Is the person who had to point out to me, the so-called trauma expert, that I was suffering from vicarious trauma and that I needed to get help. And it was such a good lesson for me. I'm actually thankful for the experience. I think it gave me a chance to relate a little more deeply with people, to realize that I'm not immune, and actually what we were dealing with made nationwide news. It was no surprise. We were all affected by it, and the whole community we worked with was affected by this series of horrible events that don't need to be repeated. And I got the help I needed. And there's a lot of good books out there, but Trauma Stewardship is a good one. Do you know this book? I really like this book. But and I haven't read it in years, but I can just tell you that in going through that, some of the things that were red flags were I was pushing my whole staff really hard, and I was pushing myself really hard because I thought that I was supposed to be able to handle it all. I was trying, right? No, I was falling apart. So I was just trying to power through and get everybody to come with me when we were all compromised, all of us, the whole community. And so I got it right away. I mean, and I it's one of those things where my body knew. My body was very well versed in what was going on, but was I paying attention? No. And that's one of the things that happens when you're in a traumatic state is you lose that body awareness. And that happens if you're running from something. We don't have any more saber-toothed tigers, but we have things we can run from. You lose body awareness, your entire focus is on getting out of where you are, or freezing, or punching your way out, fight, flight, freeze. Has anybody ever seen that there's this amazing footage on YouTube of a polar bear that is they tranquilize him to tag him because they're trying to do work to do what they can to save the habitat, and the only way they can catch them is to run them down by helicopter, and then they shoot a dart of tranquilizer that doesn't hurt. Well, I'm sure it hurts, but it doesn't do any physiologic long-term harm. They're very careful about that, and they calibrate the weight, through photographs and everything. So they're careful with the dosage and all that. But what they show is in the footage is when the bear starts to come out of the tranquilizer, his movements start to turn into running again. He's still in flight, and then as he starts to come to, and he's more coherent, he looks around, he sees that he's alone. Or he thinks he's alone. He's not, but he thinks he's alone. He thinks he's okay. He takes a huge sigh, shudders, gets up and trundles off. And that's what critters do. They shake it off. And there's these body-centered techniques now that there's one that literally imitates that called TRE, traumatic traumatic release exercise. Has anybody ever heard of TRE? You've heard of it? It's used in military around the world, and literally people lie on their backs, and they put people through exercise to tire the muscles that you use for trembling, so that they'll more easily tremble. And then they have people lie on their backs, and they literally teach them to go into tremble. And there's no associative verbalization. And whatever comes up, they allow it to be subvocal, so that people don't have to say anything about what they're going through. And people shake, and then people start to shake. It's the strangest looking thing. I'm certified in it. I don't teach it. I just wanted the experience. And my son uses it, and he loves it. But people learn to just tremble over their entire bodies, and they release years of trauma, and they don't even need to know what this is because it's stored in there, which is fascinating information for us. So it's another reason why we need to pendulate our self-regulation of our nervous system with physical, with physical movement. I changed the flip chart. And also with a kind of stillness that allows us to be more aware. And I know we've all had to be, because of the way we're trained, we all have to be in therapy, and most of us probably have all been in group therapy, right? Have you ever been in a group where, well, anyway, this is a typical experience. You all come and sit there and say, so how's it going with everybody? Oh, great, nothing. So any issues to discuss? No, everything's fine. Now just go into the same group 10 minutes later. Oh, it was horrible. I don't know how I could have forgotten that happened. Everybody's it's just below the surface of our conscious awareness, right? And it's there. But we're in the survival mode, low level, but we're in the survival mode where it's just kept underneath. So it's so important that we have a self-care ritual every day. It doesn't have to be the one I'm getting ready to show you. It can be anything. It can just be lying in bed before you get up and just allowing everything to come in and feel everything. Whatever works for you. It's often through a cultural lens that you have your own thing, and rituals are absolutely vastly important. So again, it's back to repetition. If you give your system something that's repeated, then your system, your conscious awareness, your spirit, your body, mind, spirit knows this ritual and will use it every day. And then you have that place to honor yourself. So loving, so important to be your own best friend. Do I have your permission to do something that's just body centered? Okay. And Now, this is not English class. Thank God, I'm terrible at English grammar. I'm learning another language, and I'm learning how bad I am at my own English grammar. But so I'm not going to say things that necessarily make sense. This is not an intellectual exercise, so I'm not going to use complete sentences. And I may say things that just don't work for you or make you slightly uncomfortable, or you think they're weird. I mean, we've all done weirder things than this, so I'm not worried. But you can either subvocally or vocally repeat what I say. If that feels strange, don't. If you feel awkward doing that in the room, fine. You do whatever works for you. I don't care. I'm just here to contribute to you one way of resetting your emotions and getting in touch with these portals so that they stay balanced. And I can't emphasize enough that this kind of body awareness, even though it's subtle and it seems inconsequential, if you're doing a check-in like this every day, and maybe more than one time a day, it has massive effects on your nervous system. And that means it can have profound effects on your health. So we're talking health and well-being here. We're not just talking about, oh, this nice little, Northern California self-care airy-fairy. No, this is actually really serious primordial stuff that has been around for thousands of years, and we're finally beginning to remember them. So what we're going to do, let me explain first what we're going to do, and then we'll just go into it. And then I think we might have time also to do the 4 chairs, which is really fun. I'm going to have everybody ground themselves so that you're aware of your environment and you take an assessment of whether you feel safe in this physical environment, and then of how you're sitting so that you feel grounded, that this may sound silly, and that's okay, but that you're aware that your feet are on the floor, but beneath the building is the ground, the earth, and so symbolically your feet are planted on the earth, okay? You are grounded. And so that we're establishing a sense of safety, right? A physical sense of safety. And then we are empowering ourselves to establish an emotional, social sense of safety. And that's really important. And that involves body, mind, and spirit. And spirit can be interpreted any way you want. Let me just interrupt to say that some people who are slightly uncomfortable with the word spirit like to think of the brain as the brain, the physical brain, and the mind as conscious awareness, including whatever your belief system is about what is in the ethers around us, and you can think of it as all around us. Some people believe in a collective consciousness, and some people call that love. Some people call that the unified field theory. Some people call that God. So it's your individual belief system how you hold the word spirit, or you can say mind, whatever works for you. And there are 5. These are 5 portals that we're going to be talking about. There's not 5. There's 4 written here because the other is spirit. It's non-physical. So there's no need to write it down. And then you can interpret it however you wish. But what we're doing with these portals, starting with safety, which is the bottom line, most important, right? That's where we start with everything, with ourselves and with who we work with. And we check in every day, even though it may seem like we take it for granted. It's not good to take it for granted. It's good to empower yourself to check to be sure that you're safe emotionally, physically, all the time. And it does not have to be a hyper alert, and it does not have to be anxiety. It can simply be a self-soothing repetitive pattern. So then we're going to go through the other portals, and with each one, these are portals of manifestation of physical sensations that are the signature of your primary emotions. But of course, that doesn't mean that it just affects this part of your body. It's going to affect you physically all over. This is just a way that these come into us or are expressed through us so that we can get a better understanding of where we are. It's a starting point. It's information, right? It's just information for us to know how to process what's going on with us. It is a really loving, wonderful thing to do. It's like you can imagine if you do this and you're particularly upset, you can sometimes even lie down and do this, although you're less alert and your tendency maybe is to go to sleep, so I don't recommend it. But if something really horrendous has happened, you can sit really comfortably or lie down, and you can just, I've used this, you just close your eyelids softly, just open and close your eyelids softly, like it's your grandmother just pulling the quilt over you when you're a little kid. Very soothing, very quiet, gentle. So you're doing something. You're physically doing something. You're not just talking to yourself and paying attention to your body. You're physically doing a gentle movement. And then, now this may look weird, but you can also, when you're sitting, you can just rock. And I know we've all seen this in a context that can be disturbing. That's okay. And if you're not comfortable with that, then you just don't do it. But there's a reason. Why do people do this? It is self-soothing. Or if that's uncomfortable for you, we're going to be using our hands to hold these portals, you can simply use your little finger and tap. And I'm not going to have you do this. You're going to do this whatever you choose. You can also, before you begin this, and I'm talking more than I want to do as usual. I need to self-empathy. You can, if you place, everybody do this. This is really interesting. If you place your fingers where you can feel the carotid artery, sometimes it takes a while. You can start right at the jawbone, right underneath the ear, and then just slide in the indentation there softly until you can feel the carotid artery. Can you feel your heartbeat? Do everybody feel it? Everybody got it? Just stay there for a second. A normal, healthy heartbeat is not completely perfect rhythm. It varies some. But it's still rhythmic, just kind of like life, right? So that's one thing that you can do when you start out, and you don't have, now you can let go. But it's one thing that you can do to start out, to move into your body awareness, is to start with the rhythm of your heart. Because one of the things that we've learned in trauma that works for everything in life is everything has a rhythmic pattern, including the way grief works, and in bringing people out of trauma, we often use a pendulating kind of physicality because trauma is physical. And so in our everyday lives to process, and look, when somebody cuts you off in traffic, you're traumatized, but you get over it instantaneously. So it's no big deal. That's the little t trauma, right? Not the big T trauma. But these rhythms are in our bodies, and it reminds me of South Africa. The Truth and Reconciliation, I have heard, they said this only worked because they felt the villagers got out and danced and sang their shock and trauma and grief to the point where they were willing to sit down and do this. So they physically released all the mayhem and horror and violence there. Now, does it come back? Yes, but there was a massive community release. We need to learn to do stuff like that. But so you're your own little community inside, and you're creating your own little village in here, doing these strange things, whatever you come up with, and you can be really creative. You can do this in the closet or the bathroom or in your bed, wherever. You're the boss. You're the expert, right? Let's see, what else do I need to say about the portals before we do this? When you experience these, you can first go through one round and you can just say the name of each portal. And you can, and the other thing I was trying to get out of my pea brain was, You can say that when you do this yourself, we won't do this today because it's a little hard to do it in a group, but you can say it rhythmically. You can just, it looks or sounds a little strange, but you can just say, safety, safety, safety. You can just do it as a rhythm. So you can put rhythm in anything that you want to in this, but it's very helpful. You also can do this as language to your brain. Remember, you're writing on the blackboard of your brain. You can give a little Mona Lisa smile. That tells your body you're safe. You don't smile like that. It's because it's a relaxed smile. It's not a, yes, I'll do anything you say. You know, it's this kind of, wow, everything's okay smile. So you're telling the brain, I'm safe. So a little smile, a relaxed, open posture, and then something rhythmic. And that rhythm is soothing. And the repetitive rhythm tells the brain also, it's okay. It's okay. So these are the ways that you write on the blackboard when you begin. And I think that's all I needed to say about it. So we're going to do this with our eyes closed. So I'm going to close my eyes because I want to give you privacy. Because some of you might, I don't know, I'll never know, you don't have to tell me, but you might think this is really strange. Probably not in this group. Just appreciate yourselves because outside of this group, this kind of thing can make people very uncomfortable. So, and you know, that's why you're not necessarily going to be able to do this right away. Is take this. Pepper taught us something to do with our clients. Like I say, they're the experts, and then you're there to serve them. But this is a gift to you, and this is from biocognitive psychology and neuroscience, or grandma. Sometimes I just I'm like, whatever. Okay, so it's scientific. All right. But we've known this for how long? You know, it's that cultural paradigm. You want it to be an authoritative, you want to be taken seriously, so you couch it in, you know, our nomenclature. Okay. So, all right, I'm gonna, when we come out of this, I'm gonna have you just subvocally count to 5, and then when you open your eyes, just don't be any big hurry. Just breathe normally and naturally, but just because what we're doing is we're expanding our horizons. And what does that mean? Well, we're expanding our biosymbolic horizons because we're biological beings. So we're opening ourselves up to witnessing ourselves, and that's an expansion of our horizon instead of listening to what's written on the blackboard. Because listening to what's on the blackboard is instructions to the body and back and forth. But do you know that the vagus nerve gets 90% of its information from the body and 10% from the brain? So guess who's in charge? And if you're not in charge yourself of and aware of who's running the show for 90% of the time, then you're compromised. And the kind of serious work you guys do, y'all do, you cannot be compromised. And you really do need to have some version of this. It certainly doesn't have to be this, that you use on a regular basis to befriend yourself and take care of yourself. And I just had the most wonderful conversation with Sandra about this. Just how important it is to go through this internal process of the 4 chairs. And when you find yourself giving yourself a hard time, self-empathy, so vital. And I don't know anybody who can give empathy without giving self-empathy first. And I can tell you that as a family mediator and other things that I do, there have been times when I have had to excuse myself because I'm overwhelmed or I'm furious. and I have to go collect myself, and I just own it. And it's inconvenient, and it's sometimes uncomfortable, but it also honors everybody, me and whomever I'm with in the room, because we're co-authoring what we're doing, right? So now you're gonna witness a rare moment in history. Pepper's gonna be quieter. God. But sometimes I have to, the jackal says, where's the jackal? I knocked the jackal over. The jackal says, will you shut up? You know, so, anyway. So, feet on the floor. Sometimes that works, it's not so bad. Okay, now, no need to tell yourself to relax, because what we've found is telling yourself to relax is just giving yourself something on a to-do list, and then you add tension to your body. So never mind. The relaxing just happens naturally when you observe. So now we can just close our eyes and just sit. I know this sounds like a meditation class or something, but just be aware of your feet on the floor, the earth below the building. You're as grounded as you can be. Just feel the weight of your body on the chair. Feel the warmth of your hands wherever they're resting. And be aware of the temperature in the room, how it feels, how it registers on your skin. Just allow your breathing to follow its natural rhythm. And just check in. You have, for the next 10 minutes, absolutely nothing you have to do. And nowhere you have to go. You can choose to follow instructions, or you can choose to just be in your body. There are many ways to do this. And the body has a wisdom of its own. So we're tapping into our wisdom body. We're just observing our physical sensations. I'm just going to allow that to happen for about 30 seconds. And now, just as if you were pouring molasses over your head, just pour your witnessing, your awareness over the head, down the neck, through the arms, the trunk of the body. Just getting a sense of what you feel. Any tingling, any throbbing, any subtle internal sounds, heat or warmth, or even images. Just being aware that we all recognize all emotions because they're basic, universal human emotions. All of them. We all know shame. We all know honor. We all know abandonment. We all know commitment. We all know betrayal. We all know loyalty. We know those bimodal signatures. We've felt them in our bodies. So as we just breathe and feel, we give some benevolent attention to wherever there might be tension or any objections to sitting still or any objections psychologically, emotionally, any turbulence. And just breathe into this. Often shame and abandonment, these are archetypal wounds that we have, come with a kind of heat in the body. I'm sorry, shame and betrayal too. And abandonment comes with feeling cold and alone. So even the temperature of our bodies can speak to us of what we're feeling and what we're needing. And just notice where in these different modes, where is the tension? Where is the objection? Allow your body to speak through this signature. All you need to do is breathe. Just witnessing. We're just here as a benevolent witness. To breathe and accept and love ourselves. No need to fix. No need to problem solve. If a question comes of what to do, we can simply float that out there like clouds in the sky. And just allow the answers to come from instinct, not from intellect. So it's okay if your mind begins to question. Just float the question. Allow it to be. And choose not to follow it. Choose not to repeat. Now to go back to visit the portals, place both your hands on your belly, just below the belly button, and just rest them there. Just like you had a nice, big, relaxed beer belly, and you just didn't have a care in the world. Just sit like that. Just rest your hands. Allow your hands to relax. Allow your belly to go soft. This tells your body, just in doing this, you're safe. And now, again, you can say this with me or you can just be quiet. It's safe to feel these feelings. It's okay to feel these feelings. I welcome all feelings. I am safe. I know safety. I give safety. I am safe. I am safe and I feel safe. And again, if a tension or an objection comes up, good. That allows you to take that information and give care. Change the blackboard. And again, you can be moving a toe rhythmically, or a finger, or you can be rocking. If you wish to give a rhythm to any part of the body, you can do so. Some people nod their head. When you're doing this on your own, you move at your own pace. And now place both hands over the heart, on the chest. Just allow the breathing to be natural. Love. I am loved. I give love. I know love. I feel love. I completely and totally love and trust and accept, and I have faith in myself. It's safe to embrace love. To welcome love in. There is no shortage of love in the universe. I am love. And then you can rest one hand and place the other hand in the indentation in your throat, just between the two clavicle, the collarbones. Just rest your hand there. And another alternative is you can very gently cup your fist and just gently tap on the space just below that indentation, above the sternum, on the chest. You're on the top part of the breastplate. You can just gently tap there. Either way, you can do either one. If you want to sneak a peek, I'm doing that so you can see what I mean. And the best mantra here for expression and suppression, that bimodal portal, is freedom, because it's more expansive. I am free. I have freedom. It's safe to express my love. I give freedom. I know freedom. Freedom. Now I want you to place both hands on your knees, the upper portion of your knees. And in a relaxed posture, the next portal, we're going to imagine the use of our hand or hands, your choice. So imagine whatever works for you to place one hand or both hands over the forehead in the place just above the eyebrows, in between the eyebrows. Imagine in your mind's eye one or two hands there, holding them there gently. Feel the warmth of your fingertips on your forehead in your imagination. Remember, the brain knows no difference in your imaginings of doing this and you actually doing it. Only your conscious awareness is aware that your hands are actually on your knees. Again, feeling your hand there, the comfort of the warmth of your fingers, peace. I am grateful for this peace. I choose peace. I give peace. I accept peace. I live peacefully inside my own body. And now the fifth portal, you can imagine, is all around you. Since this doesn't have a physical property, however you hold spirit. I am spirit. I am a conscious, spiritual being. I know spirit. I accept spirit. I give from my spirit. I peacefully, safely, lovingly express my spirit. Allowing in all feelings. Allowing all emotions. Allowing them to come and go like clouds in the sky. Free to be experienced. Free to express and be loved in this peaceful, safe space. Now I'm going to be quiet for just about a minute, and then I'll count to 5. you can wiggle your fingers and toes. 4, 5, and just now take your time. Allow this expansion of your bio-informational horizons to stick. You just reset your nervous system. Congratulations. I call this the anti-latte. Now, I lied. That was 20 minutes, okay? But you can do this in 5. But you know, I'm demoing, so it usually takes some time. But really, this is 5 minutes. You can do it quite quickly. But you can and you can just release amazing amounts of stuff. And you can also spend half an hour doing this, you know, and actually your body will tell you how much time you need to do this. That's what's so cool. Now, I find not everybody likes to talk after this, so please know that if I ask you if you want to share and nobody shares, that's okay. That sometimes happens. So. But does anybody want to share anything about this?
I always found like meditation difficult for me, especially because I have ADD, so it's like a battle with myself. So I can't sit quiet too long, so I find myself fidgeting around.
Yeah. I'm a master fidgeter. We could have a fidget contest. So I think the rhythmic thing is really great for that.
Yeah.
Really great for that. And I could never teach meditation. I've been a meditation student for my whole life, and I go in and out of being okay with it. I go on these 10-day retreats. It's amazing I can sit still that long. But I find that doing something rhythmic really helps me. Really helps me. And when I do the kind of work I do, I do EFT too. I mentioned that, and a lot of times I'll be working with someone, and both of us will have our eyes closed, but not the whole time. And I find I move my head, and I'm not even aware I'm doing it. It's so fascinating. So all these things are just so, like, ow, I hurt my knee. Well, there goes your hand on your knee. These things just make sense. Anybody else? I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Inga.
Inga. Oh, Inga. Hi, Inga.
The last part, when we were supposed to imagine touching our forehead.
Yeah.
I was tripping out about that and how you said it's only our conscious awareness that knows our hands are not on our forehead. And I was tripping out about just that whole, there's almost like 2 perceptions going on.
Oh, yeah.
And like
Absolutely.
tapping into that for just a second. And then I like desperately wanted to touch my forehead. Like my hands just wanted to, please just hold my forehead.
Which,
And
of
then-
course, you could have done.
But then I was like, no, go back to the imagining. And then I did that and it settled it down a little bit,
That's good.
Yeah.
The formula police were not going to come and get it. But I get it.
Yeah.
And I do that because I think it teaches us to practice the difference in writing on the blackboard, and the fact that we know that. Because we all forget. We know that. We know the past doesn't exist, but we act as if our memories are real. And whenever we dealt with trauma, we know that they are real because they're being repeated, and the signature in the body is being repeated. So yes, they are. The memory is being manifest in the body in that moment, and it's just doesn't it just make perfect sense when you understand that you understand trauma? It's physical. And we just forget that, we get caught in our paradigm. Anybody else? I always find, if you wanna say something, it's always fascinating to me, so. Sure, Danielle?
The swaying, I think I normally do that,
Huh,
and
yeah.
I find it, I found it useful during the meditation, because usually I can't speak, I usually don't feel comfortable.
Yeah, you have
too.
trouble seeing still too.
But the swaying, I think I was doing it from the beginning, and it really helped me this time to actually calm down and focus. So I found that
Yeah,
interesting.
and I mean, you know, you can also dance and sing,
Yeah.
that's even better.
Uh-huh.
You wanted to say something, I'm sorry, what's your name?
Jesse,
Jessie.
I found like really kind of focusing on what you were saying, it helped me kind of lose all sense of time, and I honestly thought when I was gonna open my eyes it was only like maybe 5 or 10 minutes, but
Yeah,
time just kind of stretched on and I felt myself actually relaxing in a way that I don't usually.
yeah. I mean, that's what it takes, right?
Yeah.
It takes a dedicated, look at the way we live. Me too, I'm like the gerbil, and so I have to build in those rituals to do it. I love to be active, but it's important to be active as an observer, an active observer. And Nicole?
Whenever we do these kind of exercises, I always find myself also struggling to not fall asleep.
Yes, well,
So-
you're probably sleep deprived, right?
Very much.
I get it.
So
That
like I
happens to me
find
on
myself
Friday
trying to like bring myself back like
Yeah.
into the moment instead of like trying to.
You know what, that's why, and I know when I'm dealing with students, that's why I say, and you don't have to do this, cause I know somebody's gonna fall asleep.
Yeah, I caught myself going,
Yeah,
wait, hold on.
yeah, exactly. Just hope you don't bang your nose on
Yeah,
the.
I was like, that's gonna be embarrassing.
I know, but I get it. I'm so glad I'm not a student anymore. I'm sorry, you guys, it's not very empathic, is it? But, oh my God, I'm talking about sleep deprived. You wanted to say, I'm sorry, your name again? Karen.
I just, I started dreaming a little bit too, but I think, I mean, my cohort knows what's happened with me in the last like 6 years, from losing my husband to my grieving process to I'm now remarried. And one of my goals in therapy is to not get so activated. I get sick and I get tense and I get migraines and things, and in another class we had kind of a checking in meditation thing, and that helped so much, and I kind of forgot about that because I'm always doing. So this was just really a good reminder, and I just felt like, you know, you have to kind of force it, just force relaxing.
Actually, you're bringing up something that I'm so thankful to you, because it's a profound thing that we need to discuss, and that is what you said about you try not to get so activated. That's a whole discussion, because when you're here in this state, and it's just like Sandra was talking about somebody who was a constant 5150. There are times when people can't tolerate being highly aroused, right? And then they need help, and then they may need temporary medication, or they may need to walk in the park with you, or, you know, whatever. So we know that we can't be formulaic about that too. But let's say within normal limits, we're not talking about somebody who's really just like in the danger zone big time. But in our normal day-to-day lives, it's really important that we allow time to be fully activated and to not. This is tricky, and let me tell you, I wish I were more skilled. I need to learn from all of you how to best describe this. But and I just touched on some archetypal healing codes that can be used in this work too, that we don't have time to go into. But it's very important that you fully feel something, but that you don't follow it and repeat feelings about it so that you're adding to it, right? But that you do no suppressing and no repressing. So there's a very big difference, and it's subtle, but it's also huge, between suppressing and repressing and distracting. That's usually some form of distraction. And yet that caveat that sometimes distraction is just the best. It's just the best second plan B, you know. But let's say just ideally you fully experience whatever it is, the loss of a loved one. It just needs that time and space, and it's painful. And maybe you have to pendulate through it. Maybe you have to just get up and go and talk to somebody and distract yourself because it's just getting too painful. But you go back and so you keep allowing it space and room so that it begins to balance itself. And as you do this, as you give it space, you can also just shift your focus. Different than repressing and suppressing. It has no fear. It has love. And that's kind of how you tell the difference, if you're on the right track, is you're lovingly, it's just like, oh, I feel bad, I gotta be good. Oh, it really hurts. Oh, let me see that, yeah. And does it feel better now? Yeah, it's starting to feel better. So yes, you acknowledge the wound, you fully acknowledge that it hurt, you cut yourself falling down, and then you move to, is it getting better? What can I do? And it's not the same as problem solving, because that can be intellectual. But then there's these. I'm going to run out of time for this, but let's see. So these are the archetypes that I was talking about a little bit, and they're so useful, and I use them all the time, and I can't praise them enough. And they're all out of biocognitive theory, but. So archetypal wounds would be shame and embarrassment, which comes with shock, with accidents, or with shaming. It's, because we're critters, we act this way when we get injured, or we're knocked off balance in any way. Either knocked off balance psychologically or knocked off balance physically. But then this can be healed with honoring ourselves. And honoring ourselves can be just giving self-empathy. But this, shifting to this, when this has been fully felt and acknowledged, is the healing code for it. It's the healing code that goes through that process that you can repeat when because when we do this over and over again and we start fretting and ruminating, especially ruminating, that's repeating, right? You're building neuromaps, and then you build cognition off your neuromaps. So when you move to honor, you're not suppressing this, you're overlaying in the brain more neuromaps. Then you shift your cognition, your thinking follows these neuromaps. It's like repair attempts or something in Gottman's language. And then abandonment, you heal by, after you acknowledge it and fully feel it, with commitment. And this can all be inside your own skin. If I shame myself because I sleep through my alarm, I can honor myself by agreeing to use my iPhone up in my loft. Abandonment is healed by commitment, and betrayal is healed by loyalty. And this can be loyalty, it doesn't have to be related like infidelity. It doesn't have to be, loyalty doesn't have to be to the object of the wound, because these are archetypal wounds, right? And pretty much this works. I mean, everything's a fuzzy line, and these are descriptions, right? This is not the actual thing, we know that. But these are pretty good. These are, you can pretty much put what we go through in life here. And then you can heal these pretty much with these. It's amazing how much will fit into these three. So This is the stage 2, the advanced version of what we just did here. This is what you do to recognize the signature of honor in your body, the signature of loyalty in your body, or the signature of commitment in your body. And of course, yes, this is an intellectual knowing. So this is after you've given yourself time to really feel what you're feeling in your body, with nothing to do, nowhere to go, and if questions and things come up, you can just float them instead of follow them. But then this you can also use when something keeps coming up and you've identified that tension or that objection or whatever that turbulence is in you physically. Here's what you can use. And then you'll know from the portal it comes from, usually you'll be able to identify it more easily. And you'll be able to see this in other people too. It's fantastic. You know, I'm sorry we ran out of time to do the 4 chairs. But I don't want to keep you any more. This will take too much time. It's really fun, but 5 more minutes. But any questions about this? That I really want to thank you, Karen, for bringing that up because it's important. I think it's confusing for us to think that we are repeating and we're ruminating, but there's this subtlety of trying to understand that, where we really need to fully acknowledge how we feel and allow it out, but not build on it, not follow it, right? Not give it fuel. But sometimes just trying to feel something more completely feels the same as giving it fuel. But it's not. It's really not. It's just allowing it to be fully expressed and moving past the fear, because it's usually fear. And even anger is usually fear. And you know, often anger is a kind of distraction from a deeper, greater sadness, because it feels empowering, you know, so that's where a lot of self-empathy can come into play. But that is a real subtle one, and I think the best way to deal with that is doing this kind of exercise where you experience the difference, you know. Anybody else? Anything you want to teach me about this process? Any feedback or anything? I've got you for another 5 minutes. And I don't care if we get out a few minutes early. I think we'll be forgiven. No one will know. Just don't rat us out. But aren't these great, these puppets? I wish we could have used them. I've had some adults don't like being used the puppets, and that just makes me laugh. Because it's hard to be in your head and be using a puppet.
How come sadness is not on the list of feelings?
Oh, you know what? This is never, and NVC will be, these are from CNVC site, Center for Nonviolent Communication in Albuquerque, New Mexico. They'll tell you this. It's never complete.
Yeah.
Never. I mean, you can add all kinds of things. I couldn't find a single thing on there that I was using. So they may be a little too many positives.
Yeah, they're all positive, almost.
Oh, okay, then that's my fault.
Aren't they? Am
Yeah,
I
it's not just
positive?
you guys. No, it's all positive.
Yeah, it's all.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's why I have a hard time finding
why
examples.
it's shorter
Yeah,
than
No,
the
I was
needs list,
looking for you.
because I only printed out the positive ones.
Yeah, they're all positive.
No, I screwed up. I wanted to, I thought about giving you the handouts. I thought, no, that's the old way, Pepper. That's paper. Don't use more paper. It's on CNVC's website. But I'm sure you will find on there the full list. And this is just the positive. And I actually like the way they group them. And so sometimes they put them like this. They put, let's see if I can remember this. Certainty. These are neat. Certainty, variety, significance, And people, does anybody know these? Do they sound familiar? The 6 basic needs? Significance, love and connection, and growth and learning. This is like Maslow or something.
When you come back in October, are you gonna be able to do the 4 chairs exercise?
You wanna do the 4 chairs exercise?
Yeah.
please.
Okay.
Can you come back in
Yeah,
October?
everybody loves that. I should have made that.
It's okay.
But you know what? It's more
Come back.
fun. But I think, I
He's right.
think it's more important to give you that other exercise to take with you to use, because you guys deserve it, you deserve. Good Lord, how big is that lens?
Yes.
That yell's intimidating. But, so, well, I am going to tell, but Dr. Hernandez Arriaga tells me I'm coming back in October. We could definitely do the 4 chairs. We could also do some work in restorative justice. If you're interested in that. Do you know about circles and informal and formal circles and how all that works and some of the restorative questions? And we can talk about that. You can tell your professor what you would like. I could also introduce you to some EFT. Triad is the form I use. It's based on biocognitive psychology too. And we can get deep. Definitely, this was not, just so you know, this is not the typical nonviolent communication lecture, where you talk about, you learn things like pulling by the ears and the 3-chair method, and there's a lot to NVC that I didn't cover, so I don't know, but I just think it's so important to begin here in our own bodies.
Yeah.
And that's been my learning from moving beyond NVC is you start at home here. Make sure this is peaceful first. And that keeps you from being formulaic and sounding like a parrot.
Was it really interesting in this class, just from the beginning, when you had us just talk about our daily ritual?
Yeah.
I always struggle with self-care and what I actually do for myself because it's really bad. But I did, when Jessie was talking about what she did, it made me think of something that I just recently started doing, and I didn't even realize the connection with it until Jessie said something. Was that I've been driving with the music off. I haven't been driving with the radio on, and that's definitely not normal for me. I love music. I've always used that as an outlet. And with that exercise, she was like, well, it's probably because everybody wants your attention all of the time, and then when you're in the car, you shut it full radio silence type thing. And I was like, oh, so that was something really cool.
Yeah, I think that's
today.
really common, that we don't realize some of the things we ritualize, right?
Yeah, because there's a lot going on right now, so that that was just a really interesting connection that I wouldn't have had for not this little exercise.
And I think a lot of this is just becoming more conscious of what we're doing in our daily lives to take care of ourselves, or not. So, and I do want to keep you, but I don't want to keep you. So thank you, all of you. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
It was really fun.